If you have any good ideas for improving the content, I'd love to read them in the comments. Love. What's a podcast actually worth listening to? History of Rome. After the first few episodes where sound produced and isn't great, it's just like 200 episodes of incredible story of the rise and fall of the entire Roman Empire. The dude knows his shit. Actively will call out his own mistakes during the following episodes when he is wrong, which isn't often. He tells it in weed better than any textbook. He almost never goes off the rails and talks about irrelevant material. And when he does, it's about baseball for like 4 seconds. He enjoys the topic and you can tell. Revolutions, also by Mike Duncan, is excellent as well. I would listen to Mike Duncan read a grocery bill. Well, there's your problem, a podcast about engineering disasters. With slides. I listen to 1 or 2 comedy podcasts, but none of them make me laugh as hard or as often as 2 civil engineers from Philly, proud sons of Philly, and a posh British woman discussing engineering and societal disasters. Edit. Only Roz is a civil engineer. Liam is a finance major because he's a good boy. Great podcast. I went to school with Justin and he was always a very funny guy with his dry sense of humor. Heard from a mutual friend he had started podcasting and figured I'd give it a listen. Probably one of the most interesting and funny podcasts out there, and I don't even know much about engineering. A little surprised that this was the top of the thread, but I absolutely agree that it's a podcast worth listening to. The Hindenburg episode is still one of the funniest things I've listened to, from the Prussia bullying to the countless accounts of Zeppelins getting caught in a gale and losing all hands. No such thing as a fish funny while being somewhat educational. I've learned a lot about Moss and Bigfoot. My favorite thing about it is normally funny podcasts need to take time to build up to a punchline, climax, or twist. So there's often lots of exposition to set things up. No such thing as a fish has educational, fascinating fun facts for its build up to funny moments / punchlines. So it's saturated with worthwhile content from start to finish. The stuff in between the laughs isn't just setups. It's really interesting stuff. This is kind of new, but check out If Books Could Kill. 2 guys discuss and analyze best-selling nonfiction books that could use a good dissection like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and The Secret. Well-researched and super funny and interesting. Love it. I've been listening to this as well. The episode on Freakonomics made me cringe at myself for thinking so highly of the book when it came out. The Rich Dad, Poor Dad episode was super good. I was dying laughing at some of the examples they pulled from the book, such as make more money by joining an MLM. Seconding this, one of the hosts is part of another podcast called Maintenance Phase that is similarly very well researched and all about debunking and bursting myths and getting to the bottom of things. Old Gods of Appalachia is a good radio drama. The way narrator speaks, you can feel the trees grow around you. Darknet Diaries. Cybersecurity guy here. Rysider gets a lot of things right and cares about the community. Or is his name Jackery Sider? I am obsessed with this podcast. Will kill you if you like the biology and history of diseases and illnesses. This is it. The presenters are awesome. Wash your hands, you filthy animals. Hardcore History. The WW1 series may be one of the best podcast series I've ever listened to. Completely rocked my world and made me realize I knew nothing about that war. The World War I is one of the greatest pieces of media of all time. All of HH is amazing, but the blueprint to Armageddon is transcendent. Hard agree. I've re-listened to it multiple times and have probably ruined several friendships by screaming about Verdun or Passchendaele in dinner party settings. Dan's magnum opus for sure. Am I the only one in the US who feels like they just totally skipped over this war in school? Like Revolutionary War, Civil War, Reconstruction, World War II. Big gap in between. What I always remembered, being in high school in the late 90s, is that they taught like 1900 present in the last chapter of the history book, and it was always like the last week of school and we never paid attention. The History of Rome, Mike Duncan. The rest is history. Hardcore history. Just want to add Revolutions from Mike Duncan if you haven't gotten around to that one yet already. That dude is an incredible historian. 99% Invisible. Behind the Bastards is fantastic, but will question humanity. You know what won't make you question humanity? The tasty feeling of some cool ranch Doritos on in your mouth. Doritos probably never directly caused a genocide. But you know who almost definitely has directly caused a genocide? The sponsors of today's show, Raytheon. Raytheon, buy yourself a knife missile, products, services. That Henry Kissinger 6-parter though. The stuff in that and the Dulles Brothers episodes should be required learning for all humans. Never heard this podcast, but fuck Henry Kissinger. I just have a policy of saying that any time he comes up, so does the host of this podcast. People are gonna learn about the child hunting island that a certain food delivery service maintains. Want to run that by me again? They had a running joke about Blue Apron running an island where you can pay to hunt children for sport. They stopped joking about it because there's apparently a non-zero amount of totally clueless people who took it seriously and kept messaging the podcast hosts to ask how they could help and shit. The Anthropocene Reviewed. Very different to the others in this list and worth a listen. It's in theory about reviewing certain parts of the human world, but think deeply personal and well-crafted auditory essays framed around those things written by a good author rather than a pure fact dump. Has space not to take itself too seriously at points as well. Be aware though, it gets deeply nihilistic and depressing at points when you wouldn't expect it, mostly due to John Green's personal sense of nihilism and depression being expressed in his art. However, because of that, it's genuinely amazing. I've cried more than once at it. I love You're Wrong About. Yup, the episode about the rugby team stranded in the Andes had me feeling every emotion. What else is there to do when rescuers are finally on their way and a young man screams avalanche but spreads everyone with a fire extinguisher but to laugh and then cry a bit? This is actually happening. Each episode is about an experience someone really had and is told in their own voice. For example, one episode is about how a woman survived an apartment fire, another is about a woman who hit and accidentally killed a person on the road. Definitely not an easy listen, but they are all important stories and experiences. Knowledge Fight. Obviously it's only about Alex Jones and InfoWars, but it's a great analysis about how misinformation spreads in our current world. A Plus podcast. I have a specific way I consume media. I have to start it from the beginning. I'm literally hundreds of hours in, and I realized the other day that if I listened to it 4 hours a day every day, it would still take me over a year to get through their catalog. Rough estimate. I have my work cut out for me. Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend is genuinely laugh-out-loud funny and often super insightful. I started out only listening to the celebrities that interested me but then realized that Conan is such a great interviewer he can make almost anyone interesting, so I went back and listened to them all. This is my top comedy podcast. I can't find anything that even compares. You need to listen to the first Timothy Oliphant one and the first Jeff Goldblum. Absolutely incredible. When Jeff Goldblum rambles in his way for like a solid minute describing how he feels about this interview and Conan responds with "most people just say one word" was so fucking funny. Normal Gossip is hilarious and the stories are all about low-stakes drama, fun and stress-free. Squirrel Story is best. Yes! Came here to post this one. I need more podcasts like this to balance out all the murder/occult/dark history stuff. Stuff you should know. I used to work with Chuck's wife in her soap shop. Dear Hank and John hang out with John and Hank Green as they chat about random topics. Light-hearted, but can be quite eloquent at times. What is her name? History podcast on forgotten/little-known female figures. 99% invisible deep dives into random topics. Some light-hearted, some serious, always eye-opening and thought-provoking. ExploreAStory podcast on museums, science, and storytelling. The Dork Forest guests talk about their passion/hobby. The Atlas Obscura podcast on random places and the people that live there. Sawbones, a marital tour of misguided medicine. It's a semi-serious look at medical history, hosted by a doctor and her comedian husband. Glad one of the McElroy podcasts are at the top. Sawbones is so good. Dungeons and Daddies if you like TTRPG/comedy. Heavyweight. You're Wrong About. The Magnus Archives. Ologies. Ologies is a ton of fun. As I imagine many listeners do, I really like the host Allie Ward. She's delightfully nerdy, open, honest, and kind. The pod itself is well structured with useful and interesting asides where Allie adds info among parts of the interview. It's a great way to be entertained while learning about somebody's cool sciencey job. The Dollop. No Sleep Till Hippo. Mightn't I the Gristle? This American Life. The Moth. I can't believe This American Life is this low. I have been listening to Ira Glass for over a decade now. Is it really not that popular? I have not seen Doughboys or Blank Check mentioned. Doughboys, chain restaurants reviewed by two very funny people. Has a lot of good celebrity guests. Blank Check, they cover a director's filmography from beginning to end. Very insightful without being serious. Funnily enough, both podcasts feature a host who loves trains. This is a podcast about filmographies. Directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion project they like. Sometimes those checks clear and sometimes they bounce, baby. Thank you for watching. In the comments below the video you can write which podcast is really worth listening to.